Previously on RGT 85 on Sunday. And with 3 unannounced titles coming in the fiscal year of 2022 for Rockstar that are being made that are games from their back catalog of games, I definitely think a Grand Theft Auto is a game that makes sense. There's been lots of rumors about Grand Theft Auto 3 and Grand Theft Auto Vice City and San Andreas potentially getting upscaled and released on current consoles. Even if you just did that, even if you just took that trilogy of games and put them on the Nintendo Switch like they are on mobile phones, I think people would pick that up. It would be great to revisit San Andreas. San Andreas is like the best Grand Theft Auto in my opinion. Like, I love the story of that game, the setting of that game, the whole gang system you had in there as well. It was a lot of fun. I definitely might be looking too far into this. I definitely may be off my rocker, and this may be a tinfoil hat thing, but I think one of these 3 games is a Nintendo Switch game. I think one of these 3 games is a Grand Theft Auto game, and I do believe that Grand Theft Auto in some way, shape, or form is going to come to the Nintendo Switch. Come on, you gotta give me a little credit for this, because that prediction was very, very well done. Of course, I filmed that video on August 8th, and today is August 12th, and things have quickly changed for this whole narrative of Grand Theft Auto coming to the Nintendo Switch. Did I have some inside information on it? No, that was really just an educated guess that fortunately has aged very, very well, because today, both Kotaku, Gamematsu, and other video game websites are reporting that a Grand Theft Auto trilogy is indeed coming to the Nintendo Switch, and evidently it's coming this fall, maybe around October for the Nintendo Switch, so it does line up with the things we talked about in that previous video. We have a bunch of details about what this is actually going to entail as far as the game is concerned, so I want to go over this stuff with you guys because, hey, you know what, when you're right about something, you should be able to gloat a little bit, you should be able to be happy about it. Last year was the whole Cyberpunk situation. Was that game going to be good? People raked me over the coals with that, and then the Grand Theft Auto situation. People thought I was just talking out my ass, which, I mean, I kind of was, but I just thought it made sense. But let's talk about this Grand Theft Auto trilogy coming to the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation systems, Xbox systems this upcoming holiday season. So, like I said, this information was brought to us by Kotaku. Gamematsu also followed it up with some subsequent details that we learned about this, but this does seem to be an actual thing. It's probably going to be revealed very soon. Maybe this will be something that we'll see in a September Nintendo Direct. We, of course, got the Indie World presentation yesterday. We talked about it. I definitely really enjoyed that Indie World presentation, but whenever we get an Indie World presentation, it always seems to be followed up with a Nintendo Direct, so it does make sense for a Nintendo Direct to happen in the month of September. If this is coming out late October, I mean, a September release date announcement would, of course, more than likely work for this situation. So allegedly, all 3 of these games are being remastered using the Unreal Engine, and it'll be a mix of new and old graphics. So we're talking about Grand Theft Auto 3, we're talking about Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and we're talking about Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. All 3 games are pretty similar at their core, but I feel like there's enough stuff going on within those games to sort of deviate it. Of course, Grand Theft Auto 3 is the granddaddy of them all, the game that got a lot of people back into gaming. I was actually one of those people. Like, when I saw Grand Theft Auto 3 for the first time, that place in my life, I wasn't playing video games all that much, but when I saw this game, this open world experience, like unlike anything you'd ever seen before, I was like, wow, I need to check this game out. Of course, Vice City brought it back to like an 80s aesthetic. I, of course, am an 80s baby, so I definitely really enjoyed that. And then Grand Theft Auto San Andreas really gave that sort of West Coast feel, you know, that mid-90s West Coast feel that was going on during that time frame. So all 3 of these games, I feel, are different enough and unique enough to where you'll want to play all 3 of these games. They all, of course, have their own storylines. They all, of course, have their own gameplay differences as well. Some additions, some subtractions were done in these games. So I think remastering all 3 of these games and using the Unreal Engine is really going to be an awesome thing for it. The mixing of the old style and the new style of graphics, like, that doesn't really bother me. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a bad thing. It's probably just sort of like the textures that they're using. They're probably just going to be like HD textures for like buildings and stuff like that, but it obviously won't look as good as something like the character models are concerned. But really, the gameplay is what matters in these games, and when you're talking about the older Grand Theft Auto games, they still are fun to play, but let's be realistic here. The controls, they're definitely dated. You know, they don't feel like a modern game should. So I think that needs to be an area of emphasis with these remasters, is basically just sprucing up the controls, making it feel like a more modern game, because I think once you implement a proper control scheme in these games that feels modern, like, they still hold up very, very well. According to Kotaku's report, they have one source who claims to have seen a snippet of the game in action, said that the visuals remind them of a heavily modded version of a classic GTA title. Now, of course, people have done a lot of GTA mods over the years, so you can kind of get an indication of what that will feel like. You know, how good will it be in the grand scheme of things? I don't really know, but I do feel like a lot of work has been put into this. Now, supposedly they have also updated the UI, but it'll also retain the same classic style that we are used to, trying to stay true to the PS2 era Grand Theft Auto games as much as possible. Like I said, that's a good thing. You know, those games are definitely time capsules, but they're time capsules that you can still revisit them and still have a great gameplay experience and still have a really fun experience. It just needs some modern graphics. It needs some modern controls. Now, according to the report, Rockstar Dundee is leading development. Before becoming Rockstar Dundee, the studio was Ruffian Games, and they previously worked on Crackdown 2, Crackdown 3, and assisted with the development of the Halo Master Chief Collection. Plans around the Grand Theft Auto remasters have shifted due to coronavirus, of course, but may continue to do so before an announcement. Remaster Trilogy was originally supposed to be released earlier this year, now a late October or early November launch. Now, of course, that would be right alongside of a Nintendo Direct presentation that would be happening in September, allegedly, like most of us are anticipating. One thing I have heard about this is that some of the content will be a bit changed in terms of, you know, making it for more modern societal standings. That information was coming from Gematsu, and I mean, you know, it's a double-edged sword in my opinion, because some people aren't offended by anything. Some people are offended by everything. So I think Rockstar does have to find some sort of happy medium. You don't want your games to be getting canceled or anything on Twitter, even though Twitter isn't real life, and the quicker that people realize that and realize that Twitter is just a very small fraction of society, maybe we can move on and become better as individuals. But, you know, some of the stuff was definitely controversial at the time. It's probably more so controversial now because of societal changes, whatever. The one thing I'm really worried about, though, more so than that, is the soundtracks for these games, because these soundtracks are iconic. You know, Vice City has one of the coolest soundtracks ever. Like, I love 80s music, and like I still love 80s music, and I love the 80s style that Vice City had, and I feel like the soundtrack was very important. You got to remember, licenses for things like soundtracks and vehicles, you know, that's why you're seeing Forza games sometimes being removed, because the licenses for these games expire when it comes to the cars and the cars that they can use in the game. It's the same thing with musical licenses. So hopefully they're able to get most of the licenses for the audio in this game. You know, we saw that with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remastered. They got most of the songs in there. Some of them, unfortunately, they did not get in there. So hopefully they're able to do something like that, where they will have a majority of the soundtrack intact. All three games are to be released in one collected package that may be sold digitally only. And I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like this would make a perfect candidate for a physical collection. This is something that needs to be on a physical cartridge. Grand Theft Auto has not been on a Nintendo device since Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars on the DS, which is an awesome game. If you've never played Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars, like, it's crazy. Like, you undo screws to like hotwire cars with the touchscreen. You're like moving kilos of coke from the trunk of your car with the touchscreen. Like, it's a ridiculous experience, but one that I really enjoyed. And I would like to see this get a physical collection. I don't know if Limited Run needs to come along and be like, hey, we'll do this physical collection, but this seems like something that deserves to be on a cartridge or a disc, because like I said, this is a multi-platform release. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because this might not be the only classic Rockstar game that actually gets a remastered treatment, because allegedly they're looking into new ports of games like Red Dead Redemption, and it basically depends on how well this Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Remastered sells if they're going to pursue this. And spoilers, it's gonna sell. It's gonna sell really, really well. You're releasing it across a plethora of systems. You're putting a Grand Theft Auto game on the Nintendo Switch for the first time since the Nintendo DS. People like open world games. People have very fond nostalgia for the Grand Theft Auto trilogy. Like, I mean, I do, and this would be a day one purchase for me, because I would love to see these games running in handheld mode on the Nintendo Switch. So does that mean we can expect a Red Dead Redemption remaster to come to the Nintendo Switch as well? I mean, why not? The game is going to sell very well on the Switch. I don't think anyone is going to debate that. I think it'll be very successful for Rockstar across all different platforms, and Red Dead Redemption is an awesome game. Like, if you've never played the first one, you're definitely missing out, because that is a game that I really enjoy. Now, as far as what else to expect from this Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Remaster. You know, I'm pretty much thinking that it's going to be pretty much what we experienced on the PlayStation 2. Maybe some cut content, maybe some cut songs, but as far as things like gyroscope controls coming to the Nintendo Switch version of the game, I'm not really holding out for that. As cool as that would be and as awesome as that would be, I really feel like the Nintendo Switch version of the game would have to be like a lead platform in order to get that sort of stuff. And really, there's a lot of stuff you could do with it, such as controlling your cars, controlling your character. I love you, Tony Cipriani. Like, you could do so much stuff as far as the gunplay is concerned, but it does feel like it would be a lot of extra work. But of course, the PlayStation and the Xbox versions of the game will probably have a little bit better graphics than the Nintendo Switch version of the game would. So why not include something for the Nintendo Switch owners like we have seen other third-party companies do? You know, we got gyro controls for a lot of games that didn't have gyro controls or motion controls on other platforms. It would definitely be a thing of goodwill, because let's be realistic, Rockstar has done, you know, a subpar job of putting their games on the Nintendo Switch. Take-Two in general, like, yeah, there's been some, the NBA 2K series, we got a terrible version of WWE, we got LA Noire, but on the grand scale, we still we're missing a lot of games on the Nintendo Switch. So I do think it would be cool, but I'm not really expecting it. Overall, though, I'm definitely very hyped for this. I'm definitely very excited for this, and I think this is going to be an awesome collection of games that, you know, maybe some people didn't check out these Grand Theft Auto games because they're in like their earlier mid-20s, so they didn't check out the PS2 ones. They got on board with Grand Theft Auto 4. But yeah, kids, remember, Rockstar used to make multiple Grand Theft Autos on one system. There was 3 Grand Theft Autos on the PlayStation 2, not including ports of things like Liberty City Stories that came out on the PSP and whatnot. No, there was actually brand new games in the Grand Theft Auto franchise that were released for the same system. I know it's absolutely crazy, but I'm definitely looking forward to this, and I hope to hear more from it very soon, maybe at that September Direct. But let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this announcement. Are you excited for this? Do you think that Kotaku and Gematsu have their sources in line here to report on this and every other website in the world that's talking about it now? Or are they all lying and, you know, they're just gonna make me look bad for my prediction on Sunday? And if you're not subscribed, you need to be subscribed, because you're getting these inside predictions. You're getting the inside tale of what's going on in the video game industry. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. It's like 95 degrees outside, and I'm sweltering. Later.